My name is Olivia Rodriguez, and 7 years ago, I donated a kidney to save my sister's life. Last month, I found my wedding invitation returned in my mailbox with a handwritten note that said, "Sorry, we're aiming for an elevated aesthetic. Maybe we can get brunch after the honeymoon?" The sister who shares my DNA, literally more of it now than ever before, decided I wasn't sophisticated enough to witness her walk down the aisle. When I called my mother in tears, she suggested, "I understand where Vanessa is coming from," and offered to show me photos afterward. That's when I realized my place in my family had never been what I thought it was. Then I discovered the journal my grandmother left me, filled with letters she'd written but never sent, and suddenly understood why she'd always told me that sacrifice without boundaries creates prisons of our own making. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The morning light filtered through the blinds of my small laboratory office at Pacific Northwest Medical Center, casting thin stripes across the immunology research papers scattered on my desk. Outside, Portland was coming alive with the particular energy of a Monday morning in spring. The cherry blossoms along the waterfront park reaching peak bloom, commuters clutching coffee cups as protection against the lingering morning chill, food carts setting up for the day ahead. My name is Olivia Rodriguez, and at 32, I'd built the kind of career that made my immigrant parents proud, if not entirely understood by them. As a senior immunology researcher specializing in transplant rejection prevention, I'd published in major medical journals, presented at international conferences, and contributed to protocols that had improved countless patients' odds of successful organ transplants. The irony that my professional expertise had become so personally relevant wasn't lost on me. My colleagues saw a dedicated scientist with a meticulous approach to research and a passion for translating laboratory findings into better patient outcomes. What they didn't see was the complex web of family obligations and emotional debts that had shaped nearly every decision in my adult life. The gentle knock on my door interrupted my review of our latest trial results. Maya, my closest colleague and friend at the hospital, leaned against the doorframe, concern evident in her expression. "Your sister's been calling the department. Again." She held out a pink message slip. "Says it's urgent. Apparently your cell is off." I suppressed a sigh, glancing at my phone and realizing I'd forgotten to turn it back on after morning rounds. "Thanks, Maya." After she left, I stared at the message slip for a long moment. With Vanessa, urgent could mean anything from a legitimate emergency to a crisis over wedding flower arrangements. Since her engagement to Ethan Williams, investment banker, country club member, and heir to a small but significant regional banking fortune, 6 months ago, my sister's definition of urgency had expanded to include color scheme debates and dessert table disputes. I dialed her number, preparing for whatever drama awaited. "Finally!" Vanessa's voice carried its usual blend of exasperation and excitement. At 29, my younger sister still approached life with the expectation that the world would rearrange itself to accommodate her preferences. "I've been trying to reach you all morning. I was in rounds, Vanessa. What's going on? Is everything okay?" The venue coordinator at Cascade Mountain Resort says they need the final guest count by Friday, not next Monday, like they told us initially. "I need your RSVP form. Did you send it?" I closed my eyes briefly, centering myself. 3 weeks ago, I'd placed the completed RSVP card indicating my attendance in the mail, just one of the numerous administrative tasks associated with my sister's elaborate 8-month wedding planning process. Yes, I mailed it right after we had coffee. Maybe it got lost. "Well, Natalie needs confirmation today. And are you bringing someone? The seating chart is a nightmare with all of Ethan's family coming from the East Coast." The subtle pressure to bring a +1 had been a consistent undercurrent in our wedding-related conversations. My single status seemed to disturb Vanessa's vision of perfectly paired dinner tables. "I'll be coming alone, As I indicated on the RSVP, I responded, trying to keep the edge from my voice. I can email Natalie directly to confirm if that helps. Perfect. Oh, and Mom wants to know if you're still joining us for the menu tasting. Saturday. Ethan's parents are flying in specially for it. I glanced at my calendar, where I'd blocked the entire day for the wedding activity despite being scheduled to present research findings at a regional conference that weekend. I'd already arranged for a colleague to take my spot, prioritizing my sister's needs as I'd done countless times before. Yes, I'll be there. Do they still need me at 11, or has the time changed too? 11 at the Evergreen. Bring that pashmina I got you for Christmas. Ethan's mother is very particular about dress code, even for informal events. The pashmina in question, an expensive but impractical cream-colored wrap that was entirely unsuited to the Pacific Northwest's perpetual dampness, remained in its gift box in my closet. I made a mental note to retrieve it. I'll be there, appropriately wrapped, I said, attempting humor. Great, thanks, Liv. Her voice brightened, the administrative crisis resolved. How's everything else? Still saving the world one cell at a time? This was our pattern. Vanessa's whirlwind of demands followed by a brief, often superficial inquiry about my life. I could have mentioned our breakthrough in targeted immunosuppression protocols. I could have shared my concerns about research funding cuts. Instead, I gave my standard response. Everything's fine. Busy but good. Perfect. Gotta run. Meeting with the florist to discuss the emergency boutonniere situation. Love you. Before I could respond, the line went dead, Vanessa having accomplished her task and moved on to the next wedding-adjacent crisis. I set my phone down, the familiar mixture of affection and frustration settling in my chest. Our relationship had always been complex, the 7-year chasm between becoming responsible and becoming lovable. I had grown up with immigrant parents' expectations weighing heavily on my shoulders. Excel academically, secure a stable profession, make the family sacrifices worthwhile. By the time Vanessa was born, our parents had established their dental practice, purchased our suburban Lake Oswego home, and relaxed into American middle-class comfort. My childhood had been defined by responsibility and achievement, hers by creative exploration and social connection. The contrast was evident in countless ways. When I earned my first scholarship, my father's response was pragmatic. This will help reduce student loans. Make sure you maintain your GPA. When Vanessa decided to withdraw from her marketing classes to backpack through Europe for a semester, they funded her finding herself journey with minimal resistance. I didn't resent these differences, at least not consciously. I understood that parents evolve, that circumstances change, that each child naturally receives a different version of their parents. What I struggled with was the persistent expectation that I would continually adjust my life to accommodate Vanessa's, while receiving little acknowledgement for my own needs or contributions. Over the past decade, I had supported my sister in ways large and small. When Vanessa launched her boutique marketing consultancy after declaring corporate positions too restrictive of her creative vision, I helped with her business plan and provided $15,000 in startup funds. When she decided her apartment was stifling her potential 3 years later, I co-signed her lease for a stylish loft in the Pearl District. Most significantly, when Vanessa was diagnosed with end-stage renal disease due to a rare autoimmune condition 5 years ago, I didn't hesitate to get tested as a donor match. The transplant surgery and recovery period represented 6 weeks. Away from my research, a major setback during a critical grant period. The risk to my own health was non-trivial, as I understood better than most. But when the tests confirmed I was a compatible donor, there was never any question in my mind. Vanessa needed a kidney, I had one to give. The calculation seemed straightforward, the sacrifice necessary and worthwhile. For a time after the transplant, our relationship shifted. Vanessa showed genuine gratitude, sending thoughtful notes and checking on my well-being with uncharacteristic regularity. My parents expressed appropriate appreciation for my sacrifice, hosting a small gathering once we had both recovered, presenting me with a delicate silver bracelet engraved with the surgery date. Yet beneath these gestures lay a subtle implication that my donation, while appreciated, was simply what was expected from me, the responsible one, the medical professional, the older sister who had so much to give and presumably little that demanded her attention otherwise. My sacrifice was simultaneously relied upon and diminished, treated as the natural result of my pragmatic personality rather than a profound gift that had altered my physical being permanently. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. A knock on my office door pulled me from these reflections. Dr. Park, Daniel, stood in the doorway, his expression shifting from professional to concerned as he read whatever was showing on my face. "Sorry to interrupt," he said. "Just wanted to check if you're joining the department meeting at 11. We're discussing the grant renewal strategy." Daniel had joined our research team 8 months earlier, bringing expertise in computational modeling that had already enhanced our approach to predicting transplant outcomes. His brilliance was matched by a quiet kindness that I'd come to appreciate during our long laboratory hours. The fact that he had expressive eyes and a smile that created an inexplicable warmth in my chest was something I tried not to dwell on. Office romances were complicated. Relationships in general had taken a back seat to my career and family obligations for so long that I wasn't sure I remembered how to prioritize my own desires. "I'll be there," I assured him, straightening the papers on my desk. "Just finishing some notes." He lingered a moment longer than professionally necessary. "Everything okay? You seem preoccupied." The simple question and genuine concern it carried nearly undid my composed exterior. When was the last time someone had asked about my well-being and actually waited for an honest answer? "Just family stuff," I said, attempting a dismissive smile. "My sister's wedding planning has reached DEFCON 1 levels of intensity." "Ah, the joys of being family event support staff," he replied with a knowing smile. "My brother got married last year." By the end, I was practically an honorary wedding planner, chauffeur, and therapist combined. This casual revelation of shared experience created an unexpected connection. "How did you maintain your sanity?" "Honestly, I set boundaries. Radical concept, I know." His tone was light, but his eyes held mine with unexpected seriousness. "Even people we love don't have unlimited access to our time and energy. Took me 3 decades and 1 burnout to figure that out." The phrase hit with uncomfortable precision. Boundaries. The concept felt almost foreign in the context of my family relationships, particularly with Vanessa. Where exactly was the appropriate boundary when you'd literally given an organ to someone? "I'll keep that in mind," I said, my voice steadier than my thoughts. "See you at the meeting." After Daniel left, I turned to my computer, attempting to refocus on work. Instead, I found myself staring at the small framed photo on my desk. Vanessa and me at Cannon Beach 2 summers ago. Waves crashing behind us, her arm thrown casually around my shoulders. We looked happy, connected. Yet even then, I'd cut short a rare vacation to drive her back to Portland for an important client meeting she'd forgotten to calendar. The pattern was so established that neither of us had questioned it. My cell phone lit up with a text from my mother. "Vanessa says you're confirmed for Saturday. Please wear something nice. Ethan's parents are very sophisticated." The subtle implications stung more than it should have. After 3 decades, I was well acquainted with my mother's perception of me as the intellectual but socially awkward daughter, too absorbed in research to develop the polished presentation she valued. Despite my professional accomplishments, in family settings I was perpetually 17, serious, responsible, and somehow slightly disappointing in my failure to embody the effortless elegance Vanessa projected so naturally. I responded with a simple, "I'll be there," and returned my phone to silent mode. The department meeting would begin soon, and I needed to compartmentalize these family dynamics to focus on the work that actually recognized my value. In the laboratory, at least, meticulous attention to detail and prioritizing substance over style were virtues rather than shortcomings. As I gathered my materials for the meeting, I resolved to approach Saturday's wedding tasting with professional detachment. I would fulfill my sisterly obligations, navigate the subtle undercurrents of family expectations, and return to my ordered life with minimal disruption. What I couldn't possibly know was that the seemingly routine wedding event would set in motion a fundamental reevaluation of my place within my family, and ultimately a long overdue reclaiming of my own worth. Saturday arrived with Portland's typical spring unpredictability: sunshine one moment, misty rain the next. I spent extra time on my appearance that morning, selecting a tailored navy dress that projected appropriate sophistication without trying too hard, arranging my naturally curly hair into something my mother might consider managed, and even applying makeup beyond my usual minimal routine. The cream pashmina, retrieved from its gift box, lay across my bed like a symbol of all the accommodations I made for my sister's vision of life. As I fastened the silver transplant bracelet around my wrist, I wore it to all wedding events as a subtle reminder of the connection Vanessa and I shared. I received a text from her. "Could you stop at that specialty bakery near your apartment and pick up the macarons they set aside for us? Running behind with hair trial." No, please. No acknowledgement of the additional task, just the assumption of compliance. I texted back my agreement and added 20 minutes to my preparation time, calculating the detour to the French bakery that was actually in the opposite direction from my apartment. The Evergreen restaurant, selected for its Instagram-worthy interior and connections to celebrity wedding planners rather than its slightly overwrought farm-to-table cuisine, was already bustling when I arrived. Precisely at 11, despite the added macaron errand. I spotted my family seated at a long table in the private dining area, along with Natalie the wedding planner, Ethan, and an immaculately dressed older couple I assumed were his parents. "Olivia, finally!" My mother rose to greet me, her smile warm, but her eyes quickly scanning my appearance for potential deficiencies. "Come meet Ethan's parents, Margaret, Richard. This is our oldest daughter, Olivia." Margaret Williams extended a manicured hand, her grip delicate but deliberate. "The doctor in the family, yes? Ethan mentioned you work in research." "Yes, immunology research focused on transplant medicine," I confirmed, setting the bakery box on a side table before taking the empty seat beside my father. "Fascinating," Richard responded with the particular politeness of someone who found it anything but. "Must be rewarding to work in medicine without the inconvenience of actual patients." Before I could address this common misconception about medical research, Vanessa swept into the room in a flurry of expensive perfume and effusive greetings. Her hairdo, an elaborate arrangement clearly requiring professional assistance, was accompanied by a white dress that, while not her wedding gown, clearly communicated bride to anyone within visual range. "Sorry I'm late. The stylist wanted to try 3 different approaches," she announced, kissing Ethan before embracing his mother with the perfect balance of affection and respect. "I see everyone's met Olivia. She's the reason I'm alive to have this wedding at all." The dramatic declaration hung in the air, creating exactly the effect Vanessa intended: surprised expressions and immediate questions from the Williams family. "Vanessa had kidney failure 5 years ago," my mother explained, reaching across the table to squeeze my sister's hand. "Olivia was a match and donated. It was a difficult time for our family." "How extraordinary," Margaret murmured, reassessing. "Me with new interest. What a sacrifice." "It's what anyone would do for family," I responded automatically, the practiced line emerging with ease after years of deflecting similar comments. Hardly, Ethan interjected, his arm around Vanessa's shoulders. It's exceptional, and we're all grateful. It's one of the many reasons Vanessa wanted you so involved in the wedding planning. Vanessa nodded enthusiastically. Absolutely. Olivia has always been my rock. I couldn't imagine this journey without her. Did you bring the macarons? The swift transition from acknowledging my life-altering sacrifice to inquiring about pastries perfectly encapsulated our relationship dynamic. I indicated the box on the side table, and the moment of recognition passed as quickly as it had arrived. Natalie, the wedding planner, smoothly directed the conversation to the menu tasting schedule, distributing elegantly designed cards listing the options we would sample. For the next 2 hours, we evaluated canapés, debated entree selections, and discussed wine pairings with the intensity typically reserved for international peace negotiations. Throughout the process, I noticed a pattern in how decisions unfolded. When Vanessa expressed preferences, they were treated as meaningful insights demanding serious consideration. When I offered opinions based on objective factors like guest, dietary restrictions, or practical concerns about service timing, they were acknowledged briefly before being gently set aside in favor of more inspired approaches. During a brief lull while the dessert options were being prepared, Ethan's mother turned her attention to me again. Vanessa mentioned you'll be attending solo. No special someone at the moment? The question, while common, carried particular weight coming from Margaret Williams, who had spent much of the tasting discreetly evaluating every aspect of our family against some invisible standard. My research keeps me quite busy, I replied, the standard explanation rolling off my tongue. The laboratory doesn't exactly foster a vibrant social life. Olivia's married to her work, my mother added with a small laugh that didn't quite disguise her disappointment. Always has been. Even as a child, she preferred books to birthday parties. Liv's brilliant, Vanessa interjected, her tone suggesting this quality existed in opposition to other, more desirable attributes. She just operates differently than most people. We've always said she's got the brains, I've got the social skills. The familiar characterization, delivered with surface, affection but undermining in its essence, settled like a weight in my stomach. The dichotomy had been established so early in our relationship that I'd internalized it completely. Olivia, the serious intellectual. Vanessa, the charismatic social butterfly. As if one couldn't possibly embody both qualities. As if my focus on academic achievement and professional excellence somehow indicated a deficiency in human connection rather than a different set of priorities. Well, we'll have to make sure you're seated with some interesting singles at the reception, Margaret declared with the confidence of someone accustomed to arranging others' lives. Richard's godson is a neurosurgeon at Johns Hopkins. Perhaps you two would have something in common. That's a lovely thought, I managed, though the prospect of being matched with a stranger based solely on our mutual advanced degrees held little appeal. The dessert tasting arrived, momentarily rescuing me from further well-intentioned matchmaking. As conversation shifted to cake flavors and the relative merits of traditional versus modern presentations, I felt my phone vibrate with an incoming message. Discreetly checking the screen beneath the table, I saw Daniel's name. Hope the wedding event isn't too overwhelming. The culture samples showed promising results this morning. Details Monday, but wanted to share the good news. The simple text, colleague to colleague, friend to friend, acknowledged both my personal and professional life without demanding anything in return. The contrast with the constant stream of expectations flowing from my family struck me with unexpected force. Olivia, phone away during family time, my mother admonished quietly, as if I were still a teenager rather than a grown professional. I returned the phone to my bag, but the brief connection to my work, to the version of myself that existed outside this elaborate performance of family roles, remained like a lifeline to a more authentic self. As the tasting concluded and final selections were confirmed, Natalie approached with a tablet displaying seating chart options. Since we're all here, perhaps we could finalize the head table arrangement? a holographic projection of the reception. Layout appeared, with the wedding party arranged in various configurations. I searched for my name, eventually spotting it at a table near the back of the venue, grouped with distant cousins and what appeared to be miscellaneous plus ones. I thought immediate family would be at the head table, I said, confusion momentarily overriding my usual careful monitoring of tone. An uncomfortable silence fell as Vanessa exchanged glances with Ethan and Natalie. Actually, my sister began, her voice taking on the particular careful quality I recognized from past difficult conversations. We're doing something a bit different. Just the wedding party at the head table, my bridesmaids, Ethan's groomsmen. It's more balanced visually and makes more sense for the interactive elements we've planned. I see, I said, though I didn't. Not really. Throughout all the wedding discussions, it had never occurred to me that I wouldn't be seated with my immediate family. The realization that I'd be relegated to the equivalent of the children's table at my only sister's wedding, the sister alive because of my kidney, landed with unexpected impact. It's just about the aesthetics, Natalie added helpfully. The head table will be heavily photographed, and we're creating a very specific visual narrative. The implication hung unspoken but unmistakable. I didn't fit the visual narrative. My sister was crafting for her perfect day. Whatever I offered in substance, I lacked in style, at least the carefully curated style Vanessa had adopted since becoming engaged to Ethan. Of course, I managed, years of practice at containing. Disappointment serving me well. That makes perfect sense. My mother reached over to pat my hand, a gesture meant to be comforting but which only emphasized the asymmetry of the situation. You'll be with your cousins from Santa Barbara. You always got along with Elena. The fact that I hadn't spoken to cousin Elena in nearly 5 years apparently didn't factor into this assessment. As the group dispersed, Vanessa pulled me aside, linking her arm through mine in a gesture of sisterly connection that felt increasingly performative. You're not upset about the seating, are you? She asked, her expression concerned, but her eyes already moving past me to where Ethan stood with his parents. It's just that everything needs to be precisely balanced for the photographs. Natalie says symmetry is essential for a timeless aesthetic. It's your wedding, I said simply. You should arrange it however makes you happy. She squeezed my arm, relief evident in her quick smile. You're the best, Liv. Always so practical. She lowered her voice conspiratorially. Between us, I'm a little worried about how you'll fit with the overall wedding aesthetic. Would you consider letting my stylist help with your look for the day? She's a miracle worker with natural texture hair. The comment, delivered with surface kindness but cutting in its fundamental judgment, struck deeper than it should have. After 3 decades, I should have been immune to these small dismissals, these reminders that in my sister's eyes, I would always need improvement. I'll think about it, I replied, disengaging my arm from hers on the pretense of gathering my belongings. I should get going. I have some lab work to check on. On Saturday? See, this is why you need more balance in your life, Vanessa said, seamlessly shifting to offering life advice despite the 7-year age difference between us. All work and no play makes Olivia a very single doctor. She delivered this with a light laugh, already turning toward Ethan, the interaction with me complete now that she'd secured my compliance with the seating arrangement and planted the seed about aesthetic intervention. As I drove back to my apartment, the cream pashmina folded neatly on the passenger seat beside me, I found myself reviewing the afternoon with unusual clarity. Each interaction, each casual comment, each seating decision formed part of a pattern I'd been too close to fully recognize, a pattern where my value in my family was measured primarily by what I could provide rather than who I inherently was. The realization didn't arrive as a sudden epiphany, but as a gradual crystallization of understanding that had been forming for years. The head table exclusion was merely the latest manifestation of a dynamic established long ago. Vanessa at the center, the rest of us in orbit around her needs and preferences. For the first time, I allowed myself to consider a question that felt almost sacrilegious in its directness. If I had known 5 years ago what I understood today about my place in my sister's life, would I still have donated my kidney? The question itself created a hollow feeling in my chest. Of course I would have. Her life was at stake, and the medical reality trumped all emotional complexities. Yet the fact that the question had formed at all represented a significant shift in my perception of our relationship, and perhaps more importantly, in my understanding of my own worth. As I waited at a traffic light, my phone lit up with another message. Not from my family this time, but from Daniel. Forgot to mention, if you need an escape from wedding madness, a group from the lab is hiking Forest Park tomorrow. Very non-wedding, very mud-focused, standing invitation. The simple offer of connection without obligation, of inclusion based on who I was rather than what I could provide, felt like cool water after crossing a desert. I hadn't realized how parched I'd become for genuine recognition. When I reached my apartment, I placed the pashmina back in its gift box and returned it to the closet. Then I did something unprecedented in my carefully structured life. I texted Daniel back accepting the hiking invitation, and I canceled my Sunday plans to help Vanessa with wedding favor assembly. It was a small act of rebellion, barely noticeable, in the grand scheme of family dynamics. But as I stood in my quiet apartment, I felt something shift inside me, the first delicate recalibration of a lifetime of unbalanced scales. I had no idea then that this subtle adjustment would ultimately lead to a complete transformation in how I understood my worth, my relationships, and my right to establish boundaries, even with the sister who carried my kidney within her. What I couldn't possibly know as I prepared for a simple hike with colleagues was that 2 weeks later, an uninvited wedding invitation would arrive back in my mailbox, setting in motion a reckoning that would forever alter the foundations of my family. Or that my grandmother, through letters written but never sent, had already provided the wisdom I would need to navigate the painful recognition of my true place in my sister's carefully curated life. The morning after the tasting event, I woke to unusually bright sunshine streaming through my bedroom windows. For once, Portland's perpetual cloud cover had lifted, as if nature itself approved of my small act of boundary setting. I prepared for the hiking excursion with a strange sense of lightness, selecting practical outdoor clothes that would have horrified Margaret Williams but felt authentically comfortable to me. As I laced up my hiking boots, well worn from occasional weekend escapes to Mount Hood, my phone buzzed with Vanessa's incoming call. I stared at the screen for 3 full rings, something unfamiliar rising within me. For the first time in memory, I didn't immediately answer my sister's call. Instead, I finished tying my boots, checked my backpack for water and trail snacks, and only then, standing at my full height rather than hunched over my phone, did I answer. "Morning, Vanessa," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "Liv, where are you? We're all at Mom and Dad's waiting to start on the favor boxes. Mom made those cinnamon rolls you like." The bribe was so familiar, it almost made me smile. Whenever the family needed my help with a particularly tedious or time-consuming task, my mother's cinnamon rolls magically appeared as incentive. "I'm not coming today," I replied, the words feeling foreign in my mouth. I made other plans. The silence that followed contained genuine shock. In Vanessa's experience, I didn't make other plans when family, particularly her, needed me. "What do you mean, other plans?" Her voice conveyed disbelief tinged with the beginning of irritation. "We've had this scheduled for weeks. There are over 200 favor boxes to assemble." "I'm going hiking with some colleagues from the lab," I explained, surprised by how little justification I felt compelled to offer. "I need some fresh air after being inside all week." "Hiking? Since when do you hike?" The skepticism in her voice was almost comical, as if I'd announced plans to take up professional bull riding. Though I'd grown up in the same Pacific Northwest landscape she had, participated in the same mandatory outdoor school programs, my sister had somehow categorized me as exclusively indoor dwelling. Is this about the head table thing? Because if you're upset... It's not about the table, I interrupted, surprising us both. I just need a day for myself. I'm sure everyone can manage the favor boxes without me. But we divided the work, assuming you'd be here, she protested, her voice taking on the particular edge that usually preceded getting her way. Mom's already making lists based on 4 people working. In the background, I could hear my mother's voice asking what was wrong, followed by my father's deeper tones, suggesting they could call my cousin Elena to help instead. I'm sure you'll figure it out, I said, maintaining calm despite the fluttering sensation in my stomach, the physical manifestation of breaking a lifelong pattern. I'll check in tomorrow about next steps for the welcome bags. Olivia, this is really inconvenient, Vanessa said, dropping the sisterly nickname as she did when particularly annoyed with me. The wedding is only 6 weeks away. Everyone needs to prioritize accordingly. The phrase, everyone needs to prioritize accordingly, illuminated our different understandings of family obligation with perfect clarity. In Vanessa's worldview, her wedding naturally superseded any other commitments or needs. In the hierarchy of priorities, her desires ranked supreme, a perspective our parents had inadvertently reinforced throughout our lives. I understand you're disappointed, I said, using the measured tone I employed when delivering unexpected research results to grant committees. But my decision stands. I'll talk to you tomorrow. Before she could launch another round of persuasion, I ended the call, another unprecedented action in our typical communication pattern. Almost immediately, my phone lit up with a text from my mother. Your sister is very upset. Please reconsider and join us. Family comes first. The familiar guilt trigger nearly worked. For a moment, I visualized myself canceling the hike, driving to my parents' Lake Oswego home, and taking my place at the dining table where hundreds of tiny boxes awaited assembly. I could almost smell my mother's cinnamon rolls, almost hear the particular rhythm of family conversation that would unfold. Vanessa dominating the discussion with wedding details, my father offering practical suggestions that would be politely acknowledged then ignored, my mother mediating with practiced diplomacy, and me quietly completing more than my share of boxes while offering supportive comments at appropriate intervals. The scene was so familiar, so established, that deviating from it felt almost physically difficult, like stepping off a moving walkway against the direction of travel. Yet something stronger than habit propelled me forward. I responded to my mother with simple clarity. Not today. Love you all. Then I silenced my phone, placed it in my backpack's side pocket, and left my apartment before the cascade of follow-up messages could weaken my resolve. The research team had arranged to meet at the Forest Park trailhead, a surprisingly short drive from my urban apartment. As I pulled into the small parking area, I spotted Daniel chatting with 3 other colleagues from our department. He waved, his expression brightening in a way that caused an unexpected flutter in my chest. You made it, he said as I approached, genuine pleasure in his voice. I wasn't sure if wedding madness would claim another victim. I executed a daring escape, I replied, surprising myself with the playful response. There may be favor box casualties, but I'll deal with the fallout tomorrow. He laughed, the sound warm and appreciative rather than mocking. Establishing boundaries already? I'm impressed. The hike itself was unremarkable in many ways. A moderate trail through towering Douglas firs, occasional glimpses of the Willamette River through breaks in the dense forest, conversations that drifted between professional interests and personal anecdotes. What made it extraordinary was the effortless quality of the interactions. No one needed anything from me beyond my presence and occasional contribution to the discussion. No one evaluated my appearance against an unspoken standard of acceptability. No one reminded me of lifelong patterns or expected roles. For 4 hours, I was simply Olivia, not the responsible older sister, not the medical expert, not the reliable problem solver. Just a person enjoying nature and human connection on equal terms with those around her. As we approached a particularly spectacular viewpoint overlooking the river valley, Daniel fell into step beside me, our pace naturally slowing to create a pocket of privacy. "You seem different today," he observed, his tone curious rather than judgmental. "More present somehow." The comment startled me with its accuracy. "I feel different," I admitted. "I declined a family obligation this morning, first time in, on possibly ever." "And the world didn't end?" he teased gently. "Jury's still out on that," I replied, glancing at my silenced phone. "But no immediate apocalypse, which is promising." We paused at the viewpoint, the conversation momentarily suspended as we absorbed the panorama before us. The city in the distance, the river winding through the landscape, mountains on the horizon. The perspective shift felt symbolic, offering a wider view than the narrow focus on immediate family demands that had defined so much of my life. "When I first moved to Portland," Daniel said quietly, "I called my mother every day. She was going through a difficult time after my father left, and I felt responsible for her emotional well-being. Every conversation ended with a new task. Research. This medical symptom. Look into that financial question. Call this relative who needed technical help. It was like having a second full-time job." The parallel to my own experience was so precise that it momentarily stole my breath. "What changed?" "I got sick," he said simply. "Nothing dramatic, just a bad case of pneumonia. I was hospitalized for 3 days and physically unable to fulfill her requests. And guess what? She figured things out herself. Called my brother, for the first time in years. Reconnected with friends. When I recovered, I maintained the boundary. Not out of resentment, but because I realized my constant availability was actually limiting her growth. The concept landed with surprising force. Had my perpetual reliability, my unfailing support, my constant sacrifices actually enabled patterns that ultimately served none of us well? The question felt too large to answer in that moment, but its emergence marked a significant shift in my understanding. "My sister has lived with my kidney for 5 years, I said, the words emerging more easily in this forest setting than they ever had in family conversations. Sometimes I wonder if she realizes what that really means. Not just medically, but existentially. Part of me is literally keeping her alive every day." Daniel didn't respond immediately, respecting the weight of the statement. When he finally spoke, his words carried the precision of someone who understood nuance. "Organ donation is an extraordinary gift, but gifts, once given, belong to the recipient. The difficulty comes when the gift becomes an unspoken obligation, a permanent marker of uneven terrain in the relationship." The clarity of this observation, delivered without emotional investment in my family dynamics, illuminated patterns I'd been too close to fully recognize. The kidney had become exactly that, an unacknowledged weight tilting every interaction, creating a debt Vanessa could never repay, and therefore chose largely to ignore, except when its mention served her narrative. The rest of the hike unfolded with lighter conversation, but the seeds of a fundamental reassessment had been planted. By the time we returned to the parking area, sweaty and mud-splattered but refreshed in spirit, I felt a clarity that had been absent for years. As the group dispersed to their respective vehicles, Daniel lingered beside my car. "Some of us are grabbing dinner at that new Thai place on Burnside. No pressure, but you're welcome to join if you'd like to continue avoiding." Favor box assembly. The invitation, casual, without expectation, stood in stark contrast to the demanding summons from my family. "I'd like that," I heard myself say. "Let me just check my messages first. Make sure there hasn't been a full-scale Rodriguez emergency declared. Unlocking my phone revealed exactly what I'd expected. 7 texts from Vanessa ranging from irritation to wounded feelings, 3 from my mother expressing disappointment in increasingly guilt-inducing language, and 1 from my father simply asking me to call when I had time. The escalation pattern was so familiar it was almost comforting in its predictability. I sent a single group text. Enjoyed a great hike. Hope the favor boxes went well. Having dinner with colleagues. We'll call tomorrow. Then I put my phone away and joined Daniel for the short drive to the restaurant. A small but meaningful declaration of independence from the constant pull of family obligation. Dinner with the research team revealed dimensions of my colleagues I'd never fully appreciated. Angeli's razor-sharp wit, Marco's surprising knowledge of classic films, Daniel's talent for drawing out others' stories without dominating conversation himself. For years, I'd maintained a careful professional distance, allowing work relationships to remain cordial but superficial. That evening, something shifted. I found myself sharing anecdotes from my childhood, laughing genuinely at inside jokes, and experiencing the particular pleasure of being known as a complete person rather than a collection of functions and obligations. By the time I returned to my apartment that night, I felt both energized and unsettled, as if I'd glimpsed an alternate version of myself, one who existed in relation to others but not solely defined by those relationships. The sensation was disorienting but strangely compelling, like discovering a new room in a house I'd lived in for decades. The work week resumed with its familiar rhythm of research protocols, department meetings, and administrative tasks. Yet, something had fundamentally changed in my internal landscape. I found myself more present in conversations, more willing to express preferences, more aware of when I automatically reached for accommodation rather than authentic response. The shifts were subtle but cumulative, creating small ripples that would eventually reshape the contours of my most established relationships. Wednesday afternoon brought an unexpected visit from my mother to the research facility. This unprecedented event, in 32 years she had visited my workplace exactly twice, signaled the seriousness with which she viewed my small act of rebellion. I was downtown for a dental conference, she explained as she settled into the visitor chair in my office, though we both knew the fabrication was unnecessary. Thought I'd see if you were available for coffee. I completed the notation I was making before responding, another tiny assertion of boundaries. I have 20 minutes before my next meeting. The cafeteria here actually has decent coffee. As we navigated the hospital corridors, my mother maintained a stream of casual conversation. Updates on family friends, comments on recent weather patterns, observations about hospital architecture. Only when we were seated at a small table, near the window, ceramic mugs of surprisingly adequate coffee between us, did she broach the actual purpose of her visit. Vanessa is very hurt by your absence on Sunday, she began, her tone balancing concern with gentle reproach. She feels you're distancing yourself at a time when family unity is particularly important. The familiar guilt mechanism activated immediately, a physiological response honed by decades of conditioning. Yet alongside it emerged a newer, clearer perspective, one that recognized this pattern for what it was. I understand she was disappointed, I replied, keeping my voice even. But I needed a day for myself. The wedding planning has been intense, and I needed some space to recharge. My mother's expression revealed genuine confusion. The concept of me prioritizing personal needs over family, specifically Vanessa's, expectations simply did not compute within her established understanding. But family comes first, Olivia. This is how we've always operated. Your father and I have made countless sacrifices for both of you girls. Now Vanessa needs everyone's support for the most important day of her life. The phrase most important day of her life hung between us, its hyperbolic quality suddenly striking me as almost comical. More important than the day she received my kidney? More important than her college graduation, professional achievements, or potential future motherhood? The wedding's elevation to ultimate life pinnacle reflected a value system I realized I no longer fully shared. 5 years ago, I said carefully, Vanessa needed a kidney. I gave her one without hesitation because her life was literally at stake. A wedding is a joyful occasion, but assembling favor boxes is not a life or death emergency. My mother's eyes widened slightly at the directness of this statement. No one is comparing favor boxes to organ donation, Olivia. That's a false equivalence. Is it? I asked quietly. Because it seems to me that my contributions, whether major or minor, are simultaneously expected and diminished. I've reorganized my professional schedule repeatedly to accommodate wedding activities. I've provided financial support for various elements. I've offered medical expertise when Vanessa had questions about managing her transplant medication during the honeymoon. All of this seems taken for granted, while one Sunday for myself becomes a family crisis. The cafeteria's ambient noise filled the silence that followed. Clattering dishes, snippets of conversation, the hiss of the espresso machine. My mother studied me with an expression I couldn't quite interpret, something between concern and dawning recognition. "You've always been our rock," she finally said, echoing words I'd heard throughout my life. "The responsible one, the one we could count on. It's a compliment, Olivia, not a burden." "A role can be both," I responded, surprising myself with the clarity of this insight. Being reliable becomes a burden when it means my needs consistently come last, when being the rock means I'm not allowed to have needs at all. My mother reached across the table to pat my hand, a gesture simultaneously comforting and dismissive. "You're overreacting to a simple favor box assembly, darling. If you're feeling overwhelmed by wedding responsibilities, we can adjust the schedule. There's no need for dramatic declarations about your place in the family." The characterization of my perspective as dramatic, a quality routinely attributed to Vanessa but never to me, revealed how deeply entrenched our family roles had become. Any deviation from my assigned character immediately triggered recategorization rather than genuine consideration. "This isn't about favor boxes," I said, withdrawing my hand gently but deliberately. "It's about recognizing that I have the same right to boundaries and respect that everyone else in the family enjoys." "Of course you do," my mother replied automatically, though her expression suggested this was an abstract concept rather than an operational principle she was prepared to implement. "No one questions that." My office phone's message light began blinking, signaling the approaching research meeting. "I need to get back to work," I said, gathering my empty coffee mug. "Please tell Vanessa I'll call her tonight about the welcome bag assembly this weekend." As we walked back toward my office, my mother linked her arm through mine, a physical expression of the connection she was trying to reinforce. "We just want you to be happy, Olivia. Sometimes I worry that you're too isolated, too focused on work. This distance you're creating isn't healthy." The concern in her voice was genuine, which made her fundamental misreading of the situation all the more poignant. In her understanding, my increasing independence represented problematic withdrawal rather than healthy differentiation. The possibility that closer integration with family expectations might itself be unhealthy simply didn't register as a valid perspective. "I appreciate your concern," I said as we reached my office door, "but I'm not creating distance. I'm creating Freundschaft." After my mother departed, I found myself unexpectedly emotional, not with sadness or anger, but with the particular disorientation that comes from seeing familiar landscapes from an entirely new elevation. Perspectives that had defined my understanding for decades were shifting, revealing patterns and connections previously invisible from my ground-level view. That evening, I called Vanessa as promised, prepared for emotional manipulation but committed to maintaining the small boundaries I'd begun establishing. To my surprise, she answered with unusual warmth, her tone conciliatory rather than confrontational. "Liv, I'm so glad you called. I've been thinking about Sunday, and I realize I overreacted. You've been so supportive throughout this whole wedding process. Of course you deserve a day to yourself." The unexpected reasonableness immediately triggered my suspicion. In our established pattern, conflict resolution typically involved my eventual capitulation rather than Vanessa's acknowledgement of overreach. This deviation suggested an ulterior motive rather than genuine perspective shift. "Thank you for understanding," I replied cautiously. "How did the favor boxes turn out?" "Beautifully. Mom had this brilliant idea about adding lavender sprigs, which took forever, but looks amazing. Listen, I'm actually calling about something else. Are you free for lunch tomorrow? There's something important I want to discuss in person." The request for face-to-face conversation combined with deliberate vagueness about its purpose represented another familiar tactic in Vanessa's approach to potentially difficult discussions. Creating anticipation increased the likelihood of compliance, while the public setting of a restaurant reduced the possibility of genuine conflict. "I can do lunch," I confirmed, mentally rearranging my schedule to accommodate the meeting. "Shall I come to your office? There's a decent bistro nearby." "Perfect! Meet me at 12:30. Oh, and wear something nice. My marketing team is taking a potential client to the same restaurant, and I might introduce you." The addendum about appropriate attire, a consistent theme in Vanessa's interactions with me, normally would have triggered automatic compliance. This time, I noted it with awareness rather than acceptance, recognizing the subtle reinforcement of her self-appointed role as arbiter of my presentation. "See you tomorrow," I replied without acknowledging the clothing directive. After ending the call, I found myself speculating about the important discussion Vanessa wanted to have. Given the timing and her uncharacteristic conciliation, it likely involved another wedding-related request, one significant enough to warrant strategic approach rather than casual assumption of compliance. The next morning, Daniel stopped by my office with a research question that evolved into a broader conversation about our current project. As he was leaving, he paused in the doorway with an expression of amused curiosity. "So, did the favor box situation result in family excommunication, or have you been granted a temporary reprieve?" The question, delivered with genuine warmth rather than mockery, invited honest response rather than defensive justification. Temporary reprieve? I think. Though there's a mysterious lunch meeting today that might change that status. The classic discussion in a public place to prevent genuine conflict approach, my mother's signature move. His understanding of family dynamics without detailed explanation created an unexpected sense of solidarity. "Well, if you need an emergency lab crisis as an exit strategy, just text the word immunosuppression, and I'll call with a fictional centrifuge explosion." The offer, clearly joke, nonetheless carried a genuine undertone of support that I found unexpectedly moving. "I appreciate the backup plan, but I'm hoping to navigate this one on my own. Setting boundaries is apparently a skill that improves with practice." "Like most worthwhile things," he agreed, his expression shifting to something more serious. "For what it's worth, I've noticed the difference in you this week. There's a clarity that wasn't there before." Before I could respond to this observation, he continued toward the laboratory, leaving me with the lingering awareness that my internal shifts were becoming externally visible, at least to those paying careful attention. When lunchtime arrived, I made a deliberate choice regarding Vanessa's appearance directive. Rather than changing into the backup business attire I kept in my office for unexpected meetings, I simply removed my lab coat, revealing the perfectly professional but not fashion-forward outfit I'd selected that morning. Tailored pants and a simple blouse in complementary navy tones. The decision wasn't about rebellion so much as authentic self-presentation. I was a medical researcher, not a marketing professional or social influencer. My appearance appropriately reflected that reality. The bistro Vanessa had selected featured exposed brick walls, pendant lighting, and the particular aesthetic of calculated casualness that characterized many of Portland's trendier establishments. I spotted my sister immediately, her strategic positioning at a window table ensuring optimal lighting and visibility. The calculated nature of this placement, like so many elements of Vanessa's self-presentation, suddenly seemed transparent in a way it hadn't before. She rose to greet me with an embrace that felt genuinely warm despite its performative quality, air kissing near my cheek in a gesture she'd adopted since her engagement to Ethan. "You look comfortable," she observed, the slight pause containing volumes of unspoken criticism. "I ordered sparkling water for both of us. The menu here is divine. Farm-to-table everything." I settled into the chair opposite her, noting the 3 shopping bags positioned beside her seat, evidence of a morning spent in pursuit of wedding-adjacent acquisitions rather than professional responsibilities. Despite her marketing firm's apparent success, Vanessa's approach to work had always been more flexible than my research position allowed. "How's the welcome bag assembly progressing?" I asked, genuinely interested despite my growing awareness of the imbalanced effort distribution in wedding preparations. "That's actually related to what I wanted to discuss," Vanessa replied, her expression shifting to what I recognized as her serious business demeanor. A carefully composed blend of earnestness and authority she employed when making potentially controversial requests. "I've been thinking about the overall wedding aesthetic and how to ensure everything reflects the particular vision Ethan and I have developed." The strategic vagueness of this introduction confirmed my suspicion that whatever she wanted would require careful framing to secure my agreement. I waited, allowing the silence to draw out her actual purpose rather than filling it with reassurance as I typically would. "The thing is," she continued after a moment, "we've created this very specific visual narrative, sophisticated, curated, elevated. Every element needs to align with that aesthetic to create a cohesive experience." Our server arrived with elaborate salads neither of us had actually ordered, explained as the chef's seasonal inspiration, before I could respond. Once he departed, I returned to Vanessa's circuitous approach. "What specifically are you trying to tell me, Vanessa?" She set down her fork, her expression shifting to something that might have been genuine discomfort. "Ethan's family has certain expectations about wedding presentation. They move in circles where appearance matters tremendously. I've been working so hard to create an event that will impress them, that will show I belong in their world." The vulnerability in this admission, rare from my usually confident sister, momentarily softened my growing skepticism. Behind the elaborate aesthetic considerations and status-conscious decisions lay a basic human desire for acceptance and belonging. Despite our differences, I understood this need all too well. "I'm sure they'll be impressed by all you've done," I offered. Genuine reassurance rather than automatic placation. "The attention to detail in the planning has been extraordinary." "That's just it," she continued, leaning forward slightly. "The details matter so much. Every visual element contributes to the overall impression, which is why." She paused, reaching for one of the shopping bags beside her chair and extracting a glossy department store box. "I got you this for the wedding. I was hoping you'd wear it instead of whatever you might have been planning." The box contained a dress in a subdued taupe color, elegantly cut but deliberately unobtrusive in style. The attached price tag revealed a significant expenditure, more than I typically spent on a month's worth of professional attire. Yet, despite its quality, the garment's message was unmistakable. Vanessa had selected clothing designed to make me visually recede rather than stand out, to blend into background elements rather than attract attention. "It's lovely," I said neutrally, carefully refolding the tissue paper around the dress, "though I've already purchased an outfit for the wedding, the blue silk I showed you last month." "I remember," she replied quickly. "It's a beautiful color." but it might photograph too, prominently. This would work better with our color palette and ensure the professional pictures have a consistent tone. The request went beyond typical bridezilla territory into something more fundamentally, revealing about how Vanessa perceived my role in her life narrative. I wasn't just being asked to play a supporting character in her wedding. I was being explicitly directed to visually minimize my presence, to deliberately diminish my impact on her carefully constructed aesthetic. 5 years earlier, I had given her an organ to ensure her continued existence. Now she was effectively asking me to disappear within the very celebration of that continued life, to become visually insignificant in the documentation of a day that would not have been possible without my profound sacrifice. "Let me understand," I said slowly, the clarity that had been building all week crystallizing in this moment. "You'd like me to wear this specific dress to ensure I don't visually disrupt your wedding aesthetic." Vanessa's expression revealed momentary discomfort before she regained her practiced composure. "That sounds harsh when you put it that way. I'm just trying to create a cohesive visual experience. Everyone in the wedding party is coordinating their attire. This is no different." "Except I'm not in the wedding party," I observed, "despite being your only sister. Despite having given you a kidney that makes this wedding possible at all." The direct reference to the transplant, something we rarely acknowledged explicitly, created a visible shift in the conversational atmosphere. Vanessa's expression tightened, her discomfort with this territory evident in her posture. "That's not fair, Olivia. The kidney and the wedding are completely separate issues. And the wedding party decision was about balance and friendship groups, not about how much I value you." The disconnect between her perception and mine suddenly seemed unbridgeable, a fundamental difference in how we understood the meaning of connection, contribution, and recognition. In Vanessa's worldview, the aesthetic coherence of her wedding photos genuinely held equal weight to the recognition of life-altering sacrifice. The organ donation existed in a separate category from current decisions, its acknowledgement limited to occasional dramatic declarations but divorced from meaningful action. "I'll consider the dress," I said finally, closing the box and returning it to the shopping bag. The statement wasn't capitulation but temporary deferral, a recognition that this public setting wasn't appropriate for the deeper conversation we clearly needed to have. Vanessa's expression brightened immediately, interpreting my response as agreement rather than postponement. "Wonderful. I knew you'd understand once I explained the vision. Now, about the welcome bags. I was thinking you could assemble those this weekend. The items are being delivered to Mom and Dad's on Friday." The swift transition from aesthetic control to task assignment perfectly encapsulated our established dynamic. I had been simultaneously managed as a visual element and deployed as a functional resource, all within the space of a single conversation. The pattern was so familiar, so deeply grooved into our relational landscape, that I'd navigated it automatically for years without conscious recognition. "I'll let you know about this weekend," I replied, another small deviation from my usual immediate agreement. "I need to check my schedule." Vanessa's slight frown revealed her unvoiced expectation that I would, as always, rearrange whatever plans might exist to accommodate her needs. Before she could verbally reinforce this expectation, her attention was diverted by the arrival of her marketing colleagues with their prospective client. The introduction that followed positioned me as my brilliant sister, the medical researcher, a characterization that managed to acknowledge my professional achievement while simultaneously defining me solely in relation to her. As the lunch concluded and we parted outside the restaurant, Vanessa handed me the shopping bag containing the taupe dress, her confidence in my compliance evident in her casual, "Text me your weekend availability, farewell." I accepted the bag, automatically, the weight of the box inside somehow symbolizing the cumulative expectations I'd carried throughout our relationship. Walking back toward the medical center, spring sunshine warming my face despite the emotional chill of the lunch interaction, I found myself at a crossroads both literal and figurative. The direct route would take me back to my laboratory, back to the established patterns of work that had always provided refuge from emotional complexity. The longer path through the small park would delay my return, but provide needed space for reflection. I chose the park, settling on a bench beside a small decorative pond where koi fish created lazy patterns in the clear water. The shopping bag rested beside me, its designer logo catching occasional sunlight as I considered the implications of the lunch conversation, not just for the wedding, but for the fundamental recalibration of a relationship defined by profound imbalance. What Vanessa had presented as a simple aesthetic request revealed a deeper truth about how she perceived my place in her life narrative. The sister whose kidney enabled her continued existence was simultaneously indispensable and inconvenient, necessary for life itself, but visually disruptive to the perfect documentation of that life's celebrations. The contradiction was so profound it bordered on absurd, yet it perfectly reflected the paradoxical nature of our relationship throughout adulthood. As I watched the fish navigate their clear boundaries, a memory surfaced from the weeks following our transplant surgery. While I had experienced a more difficult recovery than anticipated, complications requiring additional hospitalization, and a significant delay in returning to work, Vanessa had progressed remarkably well. During one of her visits to my hospital room, as I struggled with pain and mobility, she had shown me wedding magazines she'd brought to cheer me up. Even then, from my hospital bed, I had obligingly reviewed color schemes and venue options, setting aside my own discomfort to engage with her enthusiasm. The pattern had been established long before the surgery, reinforced during recovery, and maintained without question in the years since. I gave. Vanessa received. I accommodated. Vanessa expected. I diminished. Vanessa expanded. The transplant had merely heightened the dynamic rather than creating it, adding life-altering sacrifice to the already imbalanced equation of our relationship. My phone vibrated with an incoming message from Daniel. Hoping the mysterious lunch wasn't too traumatic. Running statistical analysis on the latest samples, surprisingly promising results. Thought you'd want to know. The simple text, professional information shared with personal consideration, offered a striking contrast to the interaction I'd just experienced with Vanessa. Here was connection without manipulation, sharing without expectation, acknowledgement without agenda. The comparison illuminated the possibility of relationships built on mutual recognition rather than established roles and imbalanced obligations. I typed a response. Lunch revelatory in unexpected ways, looking forward to seeing the analysis results, and returned the phone to my pocket, my gaze falling again on the shopping bag beside me. The taupe dress inside represented more than an aesthetic directive. It embodied the fundamental question now confronting me. Would I continue accommodating Vanessa's vision of my place in her life, regardless of its diminishing effect on my own sense of worth? Or would I begin establishing authentic boundaries based on mutual respect and recognition, even if that created unfamiliar conflict in our long-established patterns? As I rose from the bench to return to the medical center, I left the shopping bag where it sat, a small but deliberate act of boundary setting that would eventually lead to much larger recalibrations in my most fundamental relationship. What I couldn't know then was that this simple decision would set in motion a series of events, culminating in the returned wedding invitation that would finally shatter my illusions about my place in my sister's carefully curated life. 2 days. After leaving the taupe dress on the park bench, I received the first concerned text from my mother. Vanessa says you left her gift behind at the restaurant. The staff couldn't find it. Should we purchase another? The message carried no acknowledgement that I might have made a deliberate choice, only the assumption that carelessness or forgetfulness had resulted in the dress's disappearance. I waited until evening to respond, using the intervening hours, to clarify my thoughts rather than reacting with my habitual immediate accommodation. No need for a replacement. I already have an appropriate outfit for the wedding. The message was factual rather than confrontational, a simple statement of reality rather than an opening for negotiation. My mother's response arrived moments later. Vanessa went to considerable expense for that dress. She's trying to create a cohesive look. Perhaps you could reconsider? The familiar pressure applied through gentle guilt rather than direct demand. Parenting strategy that had proven highly effective throughout my childhood and early adulthood. Rather than engaging in text-based justification, I called my mother directly, recognizing that this conversation represented an important inflection point in our evolving relationship. "Hi, Mom," I began when she answered. I thought it might be better to discuss this directly rather than through messages. "Thank goodness," she replied, relief evident in her voice. "I was beginning to worry you were upset. Vanessa is quite concerned about the dress situation." The characterization of my boundary setting as evidence of being upset, rather than making a considered decision, revealed much about how my family interpreted my emerging autonomy. Independence from established patterns registered as emotional reaction rather than mature choice. A misreading that maintained the family system's homeostasis by categorizing deviation as temporary disturbance rather than meaningful change. "I'm not upset," I clarified, keeping my voice even despite the frustration building beneath my calm exterior. "I've simply made a decision about what I'll wear to the wedding. The blue dress I purchased is perfectly appropriate for the occasion, and it's what I'll be wearing." The silence that followed contained my mother's genuine struggle to process this direct statement of intention. Throughout my life, such clarity of self-determination had rarely surfaced in our interactions, creating no established protocol for her response. But Vanessa specifically selected something that would coordinate with her vision. She finally said, her tone suggesting this consideration naturally superseded my own preferences. "Surely you understand how important aesthetic cohesion is for the photography." "I understand that's important to Vanessa," I acknowledged, recognizing the validity of my sister's priority without accepting it as universally binding. "And she'll have that cohesion with her wedding party." As someone seated with distant cousins at the back of the reception, my attire will hardly impact the professional photos. The reference to my seating assignment, a detail I hadn't previously discussed with my mother, created another momentary silence. This one edged with what might have been the beginning of genuine understanding. "Is that what this is about?" she asked carefully. "Your table assignment? I'm sure Vanessa would reconsider if you told her you were hurt by it." The misidentification of my emotional state continued the pattern of dismissing my emerging boundaries as evidence of wounded feelings rather than legitimate autonomy. The suggestion that I should petition Vanessa for inclusion rather than being automatically granted it as her only sister and literal lifesaver reinforced the fundamental imbalance I was beginning to address. "This isn't about hurt feelings. Mom," I explained with patience developed through years of explaining complex medical concepts to non-specialists. "It's about recognition. Recognition that I have the right to make my own choices about my appearance. Recognition that my contributions to Vanessa's life, including the rather significant one of organ donation, deserve acknowledgement beyond occasional dramatic declarations." My mother's sharp intake of breath revealed her genuine shock at this directness. In our family's emotional economy, sacrifices were made silently and without expectation of acknowledgement. To name them explicitly, to suggest they created any obligation for reciprocity or recognition, violated an unspoken rule of engagement. "Olivia," she said, her voice lowered as if someone might overhear this family transgression, "you can't possibly be suggesting that your sister owes you something for the kidney. That was a gift freely given, not a transaction with expected returns." The immediate reframing of my statement confirmed how deeply entrenched our family patterns had become. Any request for appropriate recognition was immediately categorized as transactional demand, a binary interpretation that maintained the established dynamic by eliminating legitimate middle ground. "There's a difference between expecting returns and expecting respect," I replied, the distinction suddenly crystallizing in my own understanding as I articulated it. I don't want anything from Vanessa except acknowledgement that my preferences and feelings deserve the same consideration I've always extended to hers. Of course they do, my mother responded automatically, though her tone contained the particular hesitation that suggested theoretical agreement without operational commitment. No one is saying otherwise. Aren't they? I asked quietly. When Vanessa expects me to wear clothing she's selected rather than my own choice, when I'm excluded from the family table at her wedding, when my time and energy are consistently treated as resources to be deployed rather than considered with the same care I extend to others? These patterns communicate very clearly where I stand in the family hierarchy. The conversation had moved beyond the specific issue of the dress into territory rarely acknowledged in our family interactions, the underlying power dynamics and implicit valuations that shaped our relationships. My mother's response, when it finally came, revealed genuine confusion rather than deliberate dismissal. I don't understand where this is coming from, Olivia. You've always been the responsible one, the one we could rely on without question. That's a compliment, not a criticism. Your sister needs more support and attention. She always has. That doesn't mean we value you any less. The sincerity in her voice made the fundamental misunderstanding all the more poignant. In her worldview, my reliability and self-sufficiency represented valued qualities rather than convenient characteristics that justified unequal treatment. The fact that this perspective had shaped our family dynamics for decades without consciously malicious intent didn't diminish its impact, but it did suggest the possibility of evolution rather than confrontation as the path forward. I understand. That's how you see it, I said gently, recognizing my mother's genuine care despite its problematic expression. And I'm not angry about the past. I'm simply establishing clearer boundaries for the future. I'll continue supporting Vanessa and participating in wedding preparations. I'll attend and celebrate with genuine joy for her happiness. But I'll be doing so while wearing my blue dress and maintaining my right to make autonomous choices about my own life. The resolution in my voice must have communicated something my mother rarely encountered from me. The calm certainty of a decision that wasn't open to negotiation or adjustment. After a moment's silence, she shifted to practical concerns rather than continuing to challenge the underlying principle. What shall I tell Vanessa about the dress? She'll be very disappointed. You can tell her I appreciate the thought but have already selected my outfit for the wedding, I suggested, offering a socially acceptable explanation that avoided unnecessary confrontation while maintaining my boundary. Or I'm happy to tell her directly if you prefer. I'll speak with her, my mother decided quickly, her instinct to mediate and manage family dynamics asserting itself. She's under tremendous pressure with the wedding approaching. Perhaps after the ceremony, when things have settled, you two can discuss these feelings you're having. The characterization of my emerging boundaries as temporary feelings, rather than permanent recalibrations, revealed how my mother was processing this conversation as an unusual emotional episode rather than a fundamental shift in our relationship dynamic. This misreading would eventually require correction, but forcing that recognition in this moment seemed unnecessary and potentially counterproductive. That sounds reasonable, I agreed, allowing her this interpretation for now. I'll call Vanessa tomorrow about the welcome bag assembly this weekend. After ending the call, I sat in my apartment's window seat overlooking the city lights, processing the interaction with analytical distance rather than immediate emotional reaction. The conversation represented an important step in establishing healthier boundaries while maintaining family connection. A delicate balance I was still learning to navigate after decades of automatic accommodation. My phone vibrated with an incoming text from Daniel. Research team gathering for impromptu pizza at Marco's place. No obligation, but good company available if wanted. The simple invitation, connection offered without expectation, provided welcome contrast to the complex family dynamics I'd just navigated. I texted back my acceptance and gathered my keys, grateful for the emergence of relationships based on mutual respect rather than established roles and obligations. The following weeks unfolded with a surprising lack of direct confrontation about my emerging boundaries. My mother maintained her diplomatic mediator role, carefully managing information flow between Vanessa and me to minimize potential conflict. My sister herself seemed too absorbed in escalating wedding details to directly address my small acts of autonomy, though occasional comments revealed her awareness of the shifting dynamic. "Mom says you're still planning to wear the blue dress," she mentioned during a Saturday spent assembling welcome bags in our parents' dining room. "I hope you'll at least consider a neutral accessories palette. Cream or taupe would be less disruptive in the group photos." "I'll keep that in mind," I replied neutrally, neither agreeing nor directly refusing, a response that maintained peace while preserving my decision-making authority. The compromise of considering complementary accessories rather than changing my entire outfit seemed reasonable, a recognition that relationships required mutual accommodation rather than rigid insistence on every preference. As the wedding approached, I maintained my commitment to supporting Vanessa while establishing clearer boundaries around my time and autonomy. I attended the final venue walkthrough, helped with last-minute favor adjustments, and provided calm reassurance when the florist suggested certain blooms might be unavailable. Throughout these activities, I noticed subtle shifts in family interactions, my opinions receiving slightly more consideration, my time treated with marginally greater respect, my preferences acknowledged if not always prioritized. These changes, while modest, suggested the possibility of evolutionary rather than revolutionary relationship recalibration. The patterns established over decades wouldn't transform overnight, but consistent boundary maintenance created space for gradual adjustment rather than dramatic confrontation. 2 weeks before the wedding, I experienced an unexpected professional triumph. When our research team's innovative approach to reducing transplant rejection rates was accepted for publication in a prestigious medical journal, the timing coincided with Vanessa's final wedding dress fitting, an appointment she'd asked me to attend for sisterly support and memories. "I can come to the fitting or meet you for celebration dinner afterward," I offered during our morning phone call, maintaining my newfound practice of presenting options rather than automatic accommodation. The journal acceptance is a significant milestone for our team, and we're gathering for a small celebration at 4. "A journal publication?" Vanessa repeated, genuine confusion in her voice. "That's great, but surely it can wait until after the wedding? This fitting is the final one before the big day. I need my sister there." The implicit prioritization of her wedding preparation over my professional achievement revealed how deeply our family's value system had become internalized, my accomplishments perpetually secondary to her momentary needs. Rather than immediately acquiescing as I would have in the past, I maintained my boundary with gentle firmness. "I understand this fitting is important to you, and my research publication is important to me. I can attend the fitting or meet you afterward, but I won't be missing the team celebration." The momentary silence that followed contained genuine surprise rather than manipulation, Vanessa encountering an unfamiliar version of her typically accommodating sister. "Fine," she finally said, her tone suggesting this represented significant concession rather than reasonable adjustment. "The fitting's at 2. If you can make that, you should still have time for your journal thing afterward." "Perfect," I replied, choosing to focus on the solution rather than the dismissive characterization of my professional milestone. "I'll meet you at the bridal salon at 2. The fitting itself proved less emotionally charged than I'd anticipated. Vanessa looked genuinely beautiful in her elaborate gown, the culmination of her aesthetic vision realized in layers of delicate fabric and intricate beadwork. Whatever complicated dynamics existed between us, my happiness for her important moment was genuine rather than performed, a reminder that boundaries could coexist with authentic connection. "You look stunning," I told her truthfully, watching as she examined her reflection with critical attention to every detail. "Ethan won't be able to take his eyes off you." "You think so?" she asked, momentary vulnerability breaking through her carefully cultivated bridal confidence. "Margaret mentioned yesterday that her sister-in-law's dress was hand-beaded by artisans in Paris. I'm worried this might seem commercial in comparison." The glimpse of insecurity behind my sister's polished exterior reminded me of something easily forgotten in our complex dynamic. Vanessa's perfectionism and status consciousness often masked genuine anxiety about acceptance and belonging. Her immersion in wedding aesthetics, her concern with coordinated attire and photographic cohesion, reflected not just superficial materialism, but deeper fears about measuring up to Ethan's family's expectations. "The dress is perfect," I assured her with genuine warmth. "More importantly, you're radiant in it. That's what everyone will see, including Margaret." Vanessa's smile in response held real gratitude, creating a moment of authentic connection amid the complicated landscape of our evolving relationship. "Thanks, Liv. That means a lot." As we left the bridal salon, she surprised me by asking about the research publication, a rare instance of genuine interest in my professional life. "So what exactly does this journal thing mean? Is it a big deal in science circles?" The question offered an opportunity to share an important aspect of my identity often overlooked in family interactions. During the short walk to her car, I explained the significance of our findings in reducing rejection rates for transplant patients and the potential impact on treatment protocols. "So basically," she summarized as we reached the parking area, "you figured out how to make organ transplants work better. That's actually pretty amazing, Liv." The genuine admiration in her voice provided unexpected validation, recognition of my value beyond family utility, acknowledgement of my contributions to a world larger than our immediate circle. "Thanks," I replied, unexpectedly moved by this small moment of authentic recognition. That's essentially it. We're hoping it will make a real difference for patients. As we prepared to part ways, me to my research celebration, Vanessa to a meeting with the wedding photographer, she hesitated slightly before asking, "Would you mind if I came to your lab sometime? To see what you actually do all day?" I realize I have this vague image of test tubes and microscopes, but I've never really understood your work. The request represented such a departure from our established patterns that it momentarily stunned me. In our entire adult lives, Vanessa had never expressed interest in witnessing my professional environment, in understanding the work that consumed much of my time and energy. Her world had always been the center of our shared attention, my activities relevant only in relation to their impact on her needs and plans. "I'd like that," I said simply, genuine pleasure warming my response. "How about next week? Tuesday afternoon is usually quieter for lab tours." "I'll check my calendar and confirm," she replied, her smile suggesting this represented a meaningful shift in her perception of our relationship. "Have fun celebrating with your science people. You deserve it." As I walked toward my car, the interaction left me with cautious optimism about the possibility of genuine evolution in our sister dynamic. Perhaps the boundaries I'd begun establishing were creating space not just for my own autonomy, but for a more balanced relationship in which mutual interest and recognition could flourish. What I couldn't know then was that this moment of apparent breakthrough would be followed by a dramatic reversal that would ultimately reveal the true limitations of our family patterns. Limitations crystallized in a returned wedding invitation that would force final clarity about my place in my sister's carefully curated life. The research celebration unfolded with genuine warmth and collegial appreciation, a welcome contrast to the complex emotional choreography of family interactions. My team members' recognition of our collective achievement and my specific contributions to the project's success provided validation based on actual accomplishment rather than prescribed roles or relational utility. As glasses of champagne were distributed in the conference room overlooking Portland's eastern vista, Dr. Chen, our department head, offered a brief but meaningful acknowledgement of our work. This publication represents not just scientific advancement, but real hope for patients facing transplant challenges. Dr. Rodriguez's innovative approach to targeted immunosuppression protocols has potential applications beyond our current focus area. We're fortunate to have her expertise and dedication on our team. The simple professional recognition, acknowledgement of specific contribution rather than general appreciation for accommodation, felt surprisingly powerful after decades of family dynamics that simultaneously relied upon and diminished my capabilities. Daniel, standing beside me as our colleagues offered congratulatory comments, leaned slightly closer to murmur, "Nicely done, Dr. Rodriguez. The protocol adjustments were brilliant, though I'm still convinced we should have included the alternative pathway data in the discussion section." The teasing reference to our good-natured disagreement about certain aspects of the paper's structure represented another form of recognition, acknowledgement of my intellectual equality rather than assumed compliance. In our professional relationship, difference of opinion represented valued perspective rather than problematic deviation, creating space for authentic exchange rather than predetermined roles. "The alternative pathway data belongs in the follow-up paper," I responded with matching playful certainty, "which we should probably start drafting next week if we want to maintain momentum." "Always working," he observed, though his tone conveyed appreciation rather than criticism. "At least enjoy tonight's success before planning the next research mountain to climb." The gentle reminder to remain present in current achievement rather than immediately focusing on future objectives resonated with my emerging awareness of balance. The recognition that perpetual striving without pause for acknowledgement or enjoyment represented another form of self-diminishment. "Good advice," I acknowledged, raising my glass slightly in recognition of his insight. "To current success, then, and balanced perspectives." As the celebration continued around us, our conversation shifted to less work-focused topics. Favorite: hiking trails in the Columbia River Gorge, recommendations for a new local theater production, opinions on a controversial public art installation recently unveiled downtown. The easy flow between professional and personal, the absence of agenda or expectation, the mutual interest in each other's perspectives created a conversational landscape markedly different from my family interactions. When Daniel eventually asked about the wedding preparations, a natural topic given its prominence in my recent life, his question carried genuine curiosity rather than judgment or demand. "How are the elaborate nuptial preparations progressing? Has the great taupe dress debate been resolved?" The gentle humor in his reference to my earlier boundary setting created space for honest reflection rather than defensive justification. "Progress on multiple fronts," I replied with matching lightness. "I've maintained my right to wear blue, contributed appropriately to welcome bag assembly, and even experienced a moment of genuine sisterly connection at today's dress fitting." "Revolutionary developments," he observed with a smile that reached his eyes. "Next, you'll be expressing preferences about dessert options without apology." "Let's not get carried away," I responded, the humor masking genuine appreciation for his understanding of my family dynamics without extensive explanation. Small steps. Rome wasn't built in a day, and the Rodriguez family patterns weren't established overnight either. Our conversation continued comfortably until the celebration gradually dispersed, colleagues returning to evening commitments or taking advantage of rare early departure from the research facility. As Daniel and I walked toward the parking garage, together, he hesitated briefly before asking, "Any interest in continuing the celebration? There's a new jazz place on Hawthorne that's supposed to be excellent. Good music, decent food, minimal wedding discussion required." The invitation, clearly personal rather than collegial, though presented with comfortable casualness, created momentary hesitation as I navigated unfamiliar territory. My focus on professional achievement and family obligation had left little space for romantic connection in recent years, creating rusty social mechanisms for responding to potential interest from someone I genuinely respected and enjoyed. "That sounds great," I heard myself say, the simple acceptance representing another small step in reclaiming aspects of my life long subordinated to family responsibility and professional advancement. I'd need to change first, but could meet. "You there around 7?" His smile suggested this represented more significant acceptance than my casual response indicated. "Perfect. I'll text you the address. And just to be clear, this isn't a research team extension. Just the two of us. Good music, actual conversation unrelated to immunosuppression protocols." The explicit clarification eliminated potential misunderstanding, establishing shared expectations without pressure or manipulation. "Understood and appreciated," I replied, matching his directness with my own. "Looking forward to it." As I drove home to change for what was unmistakably a date rather than a professional gathering, I found myself reflecting on the contrast between this straightforward interaction and the complex emotional negotiations that characterized my family relationships. The simple clarity of expressed interest and honest response created space for authentic connection, rather than strategic positioning or tacit obligation. My phone signaled an incoming call as I entered my apartment, Vanessa's name appearing on the screen with familiar timing that suggested awareness of my schedule, despite her perpetual claims of being too busy to track such details. For a moment, I considered letting the call go to voicemail, prioritizing my evening plans over whatever wedding-related question or request awaited. The thought itself, the possibility of placing my own pleasure above immediate family response, represented significant evolution in my understanding of reasonable boundaries. Yet the genuine connection we'd shared at the bridal fitting created willingness to engage rather than avoid, to balance reasonable accessibility with appropriate limits. I answered, with genuine rather than obligatory warmth. "Hey, Vanessa, everything okay with the dress?" "The dress is perfect," she confirmed, excitement evident in her voice. "But that's not why I'm calling. I've been thinking about our conversation earlier, about your research publication. It's a really big deal, and I realized I've never properly acknowledged how amazing your work is." The unexpected recognition created a moment of genuine surprise. Throughout our adult relationship, Vanessa had rarely expressed interest in my professional achievements beyond polite surface acknowledgement. This explicit validation of my work's importance represented unfamiliar territory in our established dynamic. "Thank you," I replied, momentarily uncertain how to navigate this shift. "It means a lot to hear that." "I mean it," she continued, unusual earnestness in her tone. "You're literally saving lives with your brain, while I'm just helping companies sell more products with prettier websites. It's pretty humbling when I actually think about it." The self-deprecation surprised me as much as the acknowledgement of my work. Vanessa rarely positioned herself as lesser in any comparison, particularly with me. The vulnerability in this admission created an opening for genuine connection rather than established roles. "Your work has value too," I offered sincerely. "Effective communication is essential in countless contexts. And you've built a successful business from the ground up. That's significant achievement." "Maybe," she conceded, though her tone suggested unusual willingness to consider relative contribution. "But I've been thinking about everything you've done for me over the years, not just the kidney, though that's obviously the big one. You've always been there whenever I needed anything, no questions asked. I'm not sure I've ever properly thanked you for that consistency." The explicit acknowledgement of my contribution to her life, not just the organ donation but the cumulative pattern of support and accommodation, created a powerful emotional response I hadn't anticipated. After years of unrecognized giving, the simple validation of that pattern's existence and value touched something deep within me. "I appreciate that," I said simply. emotion making elaborate response difficult. "Anyway," Vanessa continued after a moment, "I really am interested in seeing your lab. Tuesday afternoon works for my schedule if that's still good for you. I want to understand what you actually do all day in that science tower." We confirmed the details for Tuesday's visit, the conversation continuing with unusual balance. Vanessa asking specific questions about my research celebration, sharing wedding updates without immediate requests for assistance, the exchange flowing with reciprocal interest rather than one-sided focus. After ending the call, I found myself in unfamiliar emotional territory, hopeful about the possibility of genuine evolution in our relationship, while cautious about attaching too much significance to a single conversation. Patterns established. Over decades wouldn't transform overnight, yet this interaction suggested capacity for growth that I had sometimes questioned in our more imbalanced moments. The evening with Daniel unfolded with unexpected ease, conversation flowing naturally between professional interests and personal perspectives, mutual curiosity creating space for genuine exchange rather than performative interaction. The jazz ensemble provided perfect backdrop for discussion that ranged from childhood influences on career choices to favorite literary discoveries to thoughtful consideration of ethical questions in transplant medicine. "I've enjoyed this," Daniel said as we left the venue several hours later, the simple statement offered without strategic intention or hidden agenda. Getting to know the person behind the brilliant research protocols. "I've enjoyed it too," I replied with matching honesty. "More than I expected to, actually." "High praise indeed," he responded with gentle humor, setting a promising baseline for potential future evenings of enjoyment, if you're amenable, that is. The straightforward expression of interest combined with respect for my agency created space for equally direct response. "I am definitely amenable, though the wedding madness reaches peak intensity over the next 2 weeks, so my availability might be limited." "Understood," he acknowledged easily. "The offer remains open when family obligations permit. No pressure or timeline required." As we parted ways in the restaurant parking lot, a brief embrace that carried warmth without presumption, I found myself appreciating the refreshing clarity of this emerging connection. Whatever developed between us would be built on mutual interest and reciprocal respect, rather than established patterns or tacit obligation. The contrast with my family relationships highlighted both the dysfunction I'd long accepted as normal and the possibility of healthier connections built on balanced exchange rather than prescribed roles. The recognition didn't diminish my commitment to family bonds, but clarified the need for continued boundary setting to create space for authentic rather than obligatory connection. What I couldn't know then was how dramatically those boundaries would be tested in the coming days, challenged not by minor aesthetic preferences or schedule adjustments, but by a returned wedding invitation that would force final clarity about my place in my sister's carefully curated life. 3 days after Vanessa's decision to postpone the wedding, I arrived home from an extended research session to find a large manila envelope propped against my apartment door. No postage or shipping labels suggested professional delivery. The handwritten Olivia on its front indicated personal placement, though I'd received no notification of visitor from my building's security system. Inside, I found a single item: my original wedding invitation, the heavy cream cardstock with gold embossing that had represented months of Vanessa's aesthetic deliberation. Across its carefully calligraphed surface, a single sentence had been written in my sister's distinctive handwriting. "Sorry, we're aiming for an elevated aesthetic. Maybe we can get brunch after the honeymoon?" The message created immediate cognitive dissonance, its dismissive tone entirely inconsistent with the vulnerable authenticity Vanessa had displayed during our recent interactions. The wedding postponement announcement had been communicated to extended family and friends the previous day. A carefully worded email explaining the decision as taking time to ensure proper foundation for lifetime commitment, rather than revealing the existential questioning that had actually prompted it. This returned invitation with its bizarre message suggested either dramatic personality reversal or context I didn't yet understand. Confusion momentarily overriding other reactions, I attempted calling Vanessa directly, receiving immediate voicemail transfer that indicated either unavailability or deliberate screening. My mother answered on the first ring when I called, her voice carrying unusual tension, evident even through the phone connection. "Olivia, thank goodness. Have you spoken with your sister today?" "No, but I just found my returned wedding invitation with a strange message," I replied, increasing concern, replacing initial confusion. "What's happening? I thought the postponement was proceeding reasonably well." My mother's heavy sigh carried through the connection, suggesting complex developments beyond my current awareness. Ethan's parents visited last night. They spent 3 hours with Vanessa alone at her apartment. When she called afterward, she seemed different. Said the wedding was back on, but with necessary adjustments to ensure appropriate standards. She wouldn't elaborate further. The information provided partial context for the returned invitation, suggesting external pressure had created sudden reversal in Vanessa's carefully considered decision. The Williams family, with their significant social connections and financial resources, had apparently exerted influence sufficient to override my sister's emerging authenticity. "I'll go talk to her," I decided, already gathering keys and purse for immediate departure. This doesn't sound like the decision she had reached after genuine reflection. "Be careful," my mother cautioned, unusual directness replacing her typical diplomatic mediation. Margaret Williams is a formidable influence, and Vanessa seemed almost robotic after their conversation, like she'd been programmed rather than persuaded. The warning heightened my concern about what pressures had been applied during that private meeting. Whatever manipulation had occurred appeared sufficient to completely reverse Vanessa's hard-won clarity about her authentic needs and values. Traffic cooperated with unusual efficiency as I drove toward Vanessa's Pearl District loft, the evening light casting long shadows across Portland's distinctive architecture. Security waved me through without announcement, a courtesy extended since Vanessa's health crisis years earlier, allowing direct access to her top-floor apartment without prior notification. My knocking received no immediate response despite lights visible beneath the door indicating occupancy. After several increasingly firm attempts, the door opened to reveal not Vanessa, but Margaret Williams, her elegant appearance perfectly maintained, despite the evening hour. "Olivia," she acknowledged with practiced social politeness masking evident displeasure at my unannounced arrival. "This isn't an ideal time. Vanessa's resting after a rather emotional few days. I need to speak with my sister," I replied, medical directness replacing social niceties. "Privately." "As I said, she's resting," Margaret repeated, position in the doorway creating physical barrier to entry. "The strain of nearly making a terrible mistake has been quite taxing. Perhaps tomorrow would be better." The deliberate mischaracterization of Vanessa's thoughtful decision as terrible mistake revealed the narratively manipulation likely applied during their extended private meeting. Before I could insist on immediate access, Ethan appeared behind his mother, his typically affable expression replaced by calculated assessment. "Let her in, Mother," he directed with unusual authority. "Family circus might as well include all performers." The contemptuous phrasing, reducing genuine emotional process to performative drama, indicated significant perspective shift from his previously diplomatic engagement with family dynamics. Margaret stepped aside with visible reluctance, allowing my entry into Vanessa's meticulously designed living space. My sister sat perfectly still on her white linen sofa, appearance flawlessly maintained yet somehow vacant, designer outfit precisely arranged, makeup expertly applied, yet essential, vitality notably absent from her expression. The contrast with her disheveled authenticity during our recent crisis conversation created immediate medical concern about potential psychological manipulation. "Vanessa," I began gently, approaching slowly to avoid triggering defensive reaction. "I received a strange message from you. Can we talk privately?" Her gaze lifted to acknowledge my presence, recognition present but emotional connection conspicuously absent from her response. "If this is about your invitation situation, I've simply made necessary adjustments to ensure appropriate wedding. Aesthetic. You understand." The flat delivery and formal phrasing, entirely unlike Vanessa's typical expressive communication, suggested something beyond simple decision reversal. Whatever influence had been exerted during the Williams' extended visit appeared to have fundamentally altered her authentic self-expression. "Perhaps we should give the sisters some privacy," my medical training prompted, addressing the Williams rather than challenging Vanessa directly in their presence. "Family matters might be better discussed without audience." "There's nothing requiring privacy," Ethan countered smoothly, positioning himself beside Vanessa with proprietorial rather than supportive posture. "We're all family here, or soon will be, for those still included in the ceremony." The deliberate emphasis on exclusion confirmed my returned invitation wasn't clerical error, but intentional removal. Something during the Williams intervention had transformed Vanessa's perception of my place in her life from essential support to expendable presence. "What exactly happened last night?" I asked directly, addressing my sister while maintaining awareness of the controlling presences beside her. "Mom mentioned the Williams visited, and afterward, you completely reversed your carefully considered decision," Margaret interjected before Vanessa could respond, her smooth social veneer barely concealing underlying hostility. "We simply helped Vanessa recognize the implications of impulsive decisions, the momentary panic many brides experience before their wedding doesn't justify destroying arrangements representing significant financial and social investment." "It wasn't impulsive or panic," I corrected firmly, medical precision replacing diplomatic accommodation. "It was thoughtful recognition of authentic needs versus performative expectations." "Such dramatic characterization," Ethan commented, with dismissive amusement. "Temporary cold feet reframed as existential crisis. Perhaps medical researchers should stick to laboratories rather than amateur psychological analysis." His deliberate undermining of both Vanessa's genuine process and my professional credibility revealed calculated effort to invalidate perspectives threatening his preferred narrative. Whatever had transpired during their intervention, clearly, involved systematic dismantling of my sister's emerging authenticity. Throughout this exchange, Vanessa remained unnaturally passive, her typical animated engagement replaced by muted observation, as if witnessing discussion about someone else, entirely. The dramatic personality shift suggested potential psychological manipulation rising to concerning levels. "Vanessa," I addressed her directly, physically positioning myself to partially block the Williams from her direct line of sight. "3 days ago, you made a thoughtful decision based on genuine self-reflection. What changed?" For a moment, authentic confusion flickered across her carefully maintained expression, brief recognition of inconsistency between recent authentic clarity and current performative compliance. Before she could respond, Margaret placed manicured hand on her shoulder in gesture simultaneously supportive and controlling. "What changed was recognition of responsibility beyond selfish impulse," Margaret answered for her. Vanessa realized the widespread consequences of indulging temporary uncertainty. Hundreds of guests with travel arrangements, dozens of vendors with contractual commitments, family reputations with social implications. The emphasis on external expectations rather than internal authenticity revealed the probable pressure points exploited during their intervention, leveraging Vanessa's established concern with appearances to override her emerging self-awareness. The manipulation showed sophisticated understanding of her particular vulnerabilities. "Obligations matter," Vanessa finally spoke, voice distant as if reciting rehearsed script rather than expressing genuine belief. Image and aesthetics create necessary structure. Appropriate standards must be maintained. The disjointed phrasing, concept fragments lacking her typical expressive coherence, suggested psychological state potentially approaching dissociative response to overwhelming manipulation. Medical. Concern immediately superseded frustration about my exclusion from the wedding. I think Vanessa needs rest, I stated firmly. Professional assessment rather than sisterly request. This level of personality alteration following emotional manipulation represents potential psychological trauma requiring immediate space for processing. Personality alteration, trauma, rather extreme medical terminology for simple wedding planning adjustments. Ethan responded, though slight unease beneath his dismissive tone suggested awareness that his intervention had perhaps exceeded reasonable influence. Vanessa is perfectly fine, just finished with indulging temporary doubts. Vanessa, I addressed my sister directly, ignoring the Williams entirely to establish direct connection. Do you actually want me excluded from your wedding? After everything we've shared, after the kidney, after our conversation this week about authentic purpose, do you genuinely want me absent from this significant life moment? The direct reference to both our biological connection and recent vulnerable exchange momentarily penetrated whatever dissociative state had been induced by the Williams manipulation. Genuine confusion replaced vacant compliance in her expression as she visibly struggled to reconcile contradictory narratives about her own decisions. The kidney, she repeated slowly. The physical reality of our shared biological connection, apparently breaking through imposed psychological barriers. You gave me your kidney. Yes, I confirmed gently, maintaining direct eye contact while the Williams exchanged concerned glances, indicating awareness their control was weakening. Part of me lives inside you, keeping you alive every day. We talked about that this week, about authentic purpose versus performative existence. Recognition gradually returned to her expression, awareness of recent emotional journey emerging through artificially imposed compliant state. I postponed. The wedding? She said tentatively, as if reconstructing memory through fog, because I needed to find my authentic self beyond performance. You did, I validated, relief replacing concern as her genuine personality began reasserting itself. It was a thoughtful, mature decision based on meaningful self-reflection. But the guests, she continued, Margaret's emphasized external pressures evidently embedded during their manipulation. The vendors, the social embarrassment, are all manageable logistical challenges, I completed firmly. None worth sacrificing your authentic well-being to avoid. Margaret attempted intervention, manicured hand again seeking controlling contact with Vanessa's shoulder. This theatrical disruption is precisely why certain aesthetic adjustments became necessary. Some influences clearly prioritize drama over appropriate social considerations. Before I could respond to this blatant attempt to reframe authentic concern as disruptive influence, Vanessa's expression shifted from confusion to gradual clarity, genuine personality visibly reasserting control over temporarily manipulated compliance. You tried to make me uninvite my sister, she stated flatly, gaze fixing on Margaret with emerging comprehension. My sister who gave me her kidney, who's been supporting me my entire life, whose validation I've been seeking through performance. Rather than accepting her unconditional love despite my flaws, the articulate assessment, completely unlike her previous disjointed recitation, confirmed her authentic self was successfully breaking through whatever psychological manipulation had been temporarily effective. The Williams exchanged alarmed glances as their carefully constructed control visibly disintegrated. We simply helped you maintain appropriate standards, Margaret attempted, social polish fracturing under pressure of exposed manipulation. The aesthetic coherence of your wedding photographs is completely meaningless compared to authentic relationship with my sister. Vanessa interrupted with returning strength, physical posture straightening as psychological autonomy reasserted itself. I can't believe I let you convince me otherwise, even temporarily. Ethan's calculated charms similarly faltered as his fiancée's genuine personality returned with uncomfortable clarity about their relationship dynamics. Darling, you're overtired. Perhaps we should continue this discussion tomorrow when emotions aren't running quite so dramatically. I'm seeing with perfect clarity for the first time in years, Vanessa countered, standing to physically distance herself from their controlling presence. Your parents manipulated my insecurities to maintain control of a narrative that serves their social aspirations rather than my authentic needs. And you allowed it, encouraged it, because it serves your preference for compliant performance over genuine partnership. The assessment, delivered with coherent conviction entirely unlike her previous dissociative compliance, demonstrated complete return of her authentic personality with enhanced insight about manipulation tactics employed against her. The transformation from controlled performance to autonomous self-assertion appeared both genuine and sustainable. I think it's time for you both to leave, she stated firmly, addressing the Williams with calm authority, replacing vacant compliance. The wedding remains postponed, potentially canceled entirely depending on significant relationship reassessment. My sister stays in my life unconditionally, regardless of aesthetic considerations or social expectations. The directness of this declaration, free from emotional manipulation or strategic positioning, represented genuine reclamation of personal autonomy rather than reactive rebellion. Whatever psychological tactics had temporarily overridden her, authentic self-determination had clearly lost effectiveness against her reclaimed self-awareness. After the Williams departed, reluctantly and with barely concealed hostility toward my interference, Vanessa collapsed onto her sofa with physical release suggesting prolonged tension, finally relieved. For several minutes she remained silent, processing the manipulation she'd experienced and her temporary surrender to external control. I can't believe I let them convince me to exclude you from my wedding, she finally said, genuine remorse, replacing performative compliance. After everything you've done for me, not just the kidney, but a lifetime of support and sacrifice. How could I even consider that, even under manipulation? The question contained genuine self-examination rather than defensive justification, suggesting continued evolution in her capacity for authentic reflection rather than habitual performance. Whatever catalytic realization our laboratory visit had triggered appeared to maintain transformative potential despite temporary derailment. Skilled manipulators target existing vulnerabilities, I explained, medical understanding replacing potential hurt about her temporary exclusion. Your concern with aesthetic perfection and social approval made you susceptible to pressure focused precisely on those values. But to actually return your invitation with that cruel message, she continued, genuine distress indicating authentic remorse rather than strategic apology. Margaret dictated those exact words, said it would ensure clean break without messy, emotional confrontation. I can't believe I wrote them, even in that weird dissociative state they induced. The acknowledgement of both the action and its manipulated context created space for genuine healing rather than lingering resentment. Whatever temporary influence had allowed her exclusionary behavior, her authentic self clearly recognized its profound inconsistency with genuine values. What happens now? I asked simply, neither directing nor abandoning but creating space for autonomous decision-making consistent with her reclaimed authenticity. She considered this question with genuine thoughtfulness rather than reactive impulse, evidence of continuing maturation despite temporary manipulation. The wedding definitely remains postponed. My relationship with Ethan requires serious reassessment, given how quickly he reverted to controlling behavior when challenged. Most importantly, I need that time for authentic self-discovery we discussed before the Williams intervention. The clarity of this response, specific priorities identified without dramatic declaration, suggested genuine integration of recent insights rather than temporary emotional reaction. Whatever transformation had begun during her crisis appeared to continue despite attempted derailment. "How can I support that process?" I offered, genuine assistance without assumption of management responsibility, maintaining the healthier boundaries we'd begun establishing. "Just by being exactly who you've always been," she replied with unusual perceptiveness. "The sister who sees me clearly but loves me anyway, who gave me a kidney without expectation of performance or perfection in return, who understands that authentic purpose matters more than perfect appearance." The acknowledgement, specific, recognition of actual contribution rather than generalized appreciation, created powerful validation of both my sacrifice and continuing presence in her life. After years of feeling simultaneously relied upon and diminished, this precise naming of my value offered recognition that superficial inclusion never could. As evening transitioned to night, our conversation continued with unprecedented honesty about family patterns, relationship expectations, and genuine aspirations beyond performative success. Whatever catalyst our laboratory visit had provided, the resulting self-reflection appeared to represent genuine transformation rather than temporary reaction, creating possibility for relationship based on authentic connection rather than established roles. When I finally departed Vanessa's apartment near midnight, our goodbye embrace contained genuine connection rather than social performance, recognition of imperfect but authentic relationship rather than idealized sisterly harmony. The journey ahead would undoubtedly include challenges, as established patterns resisted recalibration, but the foundation for healthier connection had been established through crisis and recovery. Driving home through Portland's quiet streets, I found myself reflecting on the grandmother's journal mentioned in my first telling of this story, the one filled with letters she'd written but never sent. Though fictional in this particular narrative, the concept resonated with profound truth about family relationships. Often, the most important communications remain undelivered, the most essential boundaries unestablished, the most necessary recognitions unexpressed. My journey with Vanessa, from kidney donation through wedding exclusion to authentic reconnection, represented gradual delivery of messages long held silent. My need for recognition beyond utility, her fear of inadequacy beneath performance, our shared capacity for relationship based on genuine acceptance rather than prescribed roles. As I unlocked my apartment door, a text message illuminated my phone screen. Daniel checking whether I was available for coffee following morning's research meeting. The simple invitation, connection offered without expectation, provided welcome. Reminder that healthier relationship patterns existed beyond family dynamics, creating space for genuine exchange rather than established obligation. I responded with straightforward acceptance, another small step in prioritizing authentic connection in all relationships, rather than only those biological ties undergoing recent recalibration. The kidney I'd donated years earlier had saved Vanessa's physical life. The boundaries I'd established recently might help save her authentic self. Both represented essential contributions to her well-being, though the latter required her active participation rather than passive receipt. Whatever challenges awaited in continued family evolution, the foundation had been established for relationship based on mutual recognition rather than prescribed roles, connection that valued authentic presence over perfect performance, genuine contribution over aesthetic appearance. The uninvited sister had ultimately received something more valuable than wedding inclusion: recognition of worth beyond utility and acceptance without performative requirement. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.